Have you ever felt like you were slowly disappearing, even while you were still alive? I don't mean in the dramatic, movie scene kind of way. I mean quietly, softly, like a candle fading, while the people around you say they're just taking care of you. I used to be free, truly free. My days began with the scent of hot tea at 6 in the morning, a ritual I cherished in silence. I wore bright colors that made me feel alive. I danced in the kitchen when no one was watching, and I laughed loud and unapologetically. But then, something shifted. It wasn't sudden, it was slow, so slow I didn't even notice at first. And the person behind it was my own son. He started making little suggestions. Maybe you should wear something more neutral, Mom. You don't need to wake up so early. It's not good for your heart. Why don't you stop dancing around like that? What if you fall? At first, I smiled. I thought it was sweet, thoughtful even. A son concerned with his mother's well-being. But day after day, those suggestions became restrictions, and those restrictions turned into silent rules. One morning, I reached for my favorite red scarf, one that always made me feel bold, youthful, and he looked at me with a sigh and said, "That doesn't suit your age anymore." And just like that, something inside me cracked. You see, people talk a lot about the challenges of getting older. The aches, the loneliness, the fear of being forgotten. But what they don't talk about enough is what it feels like to still be you, full of memories, passions, and desires, and have someone close to you decide that who you are no longer fits in the world. Have you ever passed through something like this? Or maybe you've seen it happening with your mother, your grandmother, or someone you love deeply, and didn't even realize it. This isn't just about tea, or scarves, or dancing in the kitchen. It's about autonomy. It's about identity. It's about being allowed to live according to who you are, even if your hair is silver and your hands carry the softness of time. What happens when love turns into control? When protection starts to feel like a cage? These are questions most adult children don't want to face. But if we don't ask them, we risk silencing the very people who raised us. The truth is, aging doesn't mean disappearing. Growing old shouldn't feel like fading into someone else's version of what's appropriate. And yet, more and more mothers like me are being shaped into something they never chose to be: passive, quiet, invisible. If any of this touches a part of your story or someone you know, stay with me. What you're about to hear might surprise you. It might even change the way you look at your own family. Because the story I'm going to share now is not just mine. It's the silent reality of so many women who once felt alive, bold, and unstoppable, and are now being told, gently but firmly, to dim their light. And it all started the day I moved into my son's house. At first, everything felt like a warm embrace. He said, "You won't be alone anymore, Mom," and I believed him. I packed up my little apartment, the one where I still had my books stacked by the bed, my favorite mug always ready for tea, and that old radio I used to dance to, and I stepped into his world. But his world wasn't mine. Suddenly, my routines became inconvenient. My choices were outdated. I was told when to eat, what to wear, even how to speak to my grandchildren so I wouldn't confuse them. Every day, a piece of me was gently pushed aside. I wasn't asked what I wanted. I was told what I needed. I wasn't seen as a woman with thoughts, preferences, and dreams. I was a responsibility, a box to check off. And worst of all, I didn't know how to speak up without sounding ungrateful. Does that make sense to you? Have you ever felt like someone was rewriting your story while you were still trying to live it? If this speaks to you in any way, I'd love to know. Please, take a moment and leave a comment down below. Share your experience, your feelings, or just say hello. It truly matters. When you share, you're not just telling your story, you're helping others feel less alone. And if this kind of heartfelt, honest conversation means something to you, don't forget to like this video. That simple gesture helps me know I'm not just speaking into the void. It shows that this message is reaching someone who needed to hear it. Also, if you feel that stories like mine deserve to be heard, if you believe that mothers, grandmothers, and aging women still have a voice worth listening to, please subscribe to the channel. It's your support that keeps this space alive. Your presence here is the reason this community exists. A place where we remember that aging doesn't mean silence, and love should never erase identity. So stay with me, because what happened next was something I never expected. Before I was a mother, I was a woman, full of life. I traveled, painted, and laughed loudly. That version of me feels like a shadow now distant, almost forgotten, but she was real. She still is real. Somewhere beneath all the layers I've been forced to wear over the years. I wasn't always the quiet voice at the end of the hallway or the woman whose suggestions are politely ignored at the dinner table. No. I was the kind of person who would hop on a train just to watch the sunrise in a different city. I wore paint on my fingertips and perfume that lingered in rooms long after I'd left. I was bold, curious, and full of stories I hadn't lived yet. Back then, decisions were mine to make. I chose where to go, who to befriend, what colors to surround myself with. I didn't need permission to laugh or to cry. My world was wide, and though time moved on and I became a mother and later, a widow, I never imagined I'd be expected to erase everything that came before, as if my identity had an expiration date. It's strange, isn't it, how motherhood can sometimes swallow the woman whole. People stop seeing you. They see mom, grandma, the elder. But what about me? The human being with layers, with desires that didn't retire when I turned 65. There's a truth hidden in plain sight that few people talk about. Society doesn't prepare us for the silent fading of autonomy. It doesn't warn us that one day, people might stop asking what we think and simply start deciding for us. And when those decisions come from someone we love, from a son we raised, it becomes even harder to question, because love makes you hesitate. It blurs the lines between help and control. I remember once, years ago, sitting on a rooftop cafe in Spain, sketching the outline of an old cathedral. The sun was hot on my shoulders, and I thought, this is what freedom feels like. That moment is still tucked inside me like a secret. It comes back sometimes when I close my eyes. But now, instead of sun and sketchbooks, I hear my son's voice, reminding me not to exert myself, not to go out alone, not to wear young colors. It's like being wrapped in soft, padded walls, always safe, always muted. There's something quietly dangerous about this kind of protection. It doesn't arrive with malice. It comes dressed in concern, in care, in the language of love. But underneath, there's a message. You are no longer capable of deciding who you are. And that message, over time, can strip away everything that once made us, us. The impact of that goes deeper than most people imagine. It's not just about missing a trip to the store alone, or not getting to cook your favorite recipe. It's about the mental weight of becoming a version of yourself you never agreed to. A role written by someone else, performed daily in a life that no longer feels like your own. Now, I want to go even deeper into this, because beyond the quiet loss of identity, there's a transformation that happens inside, a shift in mentality that no one warns you about. You begin to doubt your instincts. You hesitate before speaking. You wonder if maybe they're right, maybe you are too old for joy, for color, for independence. But let me tell you something that I've learned through painful reflection. The truth isn't in their words, it's in your resistance. That flicker inside you that says, no, I'm still here. That spark, however small, is the evidence that you haven't disappeared. It's the part of you that remembers the woman who danced, who laughed, who stood in front of a mirror and saw someone whole, not broken. This is the part of the story that rarely gets shared, the internal battle, the quiet rebellion, the fight to reclaim something as simple and sacred as your own name. Not mom, not grandma, but the name you carried before anyone depended on you. That name still matters. That identity still lives within you, waiting to be seen again. If you've felt this shift, this slow rewriting of who you are, I want you to know you're not alone. There's something powerful in saying it out loud, even if just in a whisper. Comment there, I'm on this journey too. After my husband died, I felt like the ground had vanished beneath my feet. The silence in the house was so complete, so loud, it echoed through every corner. The way he used to laugh from the other room, the sound of his slippers on the floor, the little notes he'd leave by the coffee pot gone. Just like that. It was grief I didn't know how to carry. Not at this stage of life, not when people assume you've already faced all your goodbyes. But some losses come late, and they still hurt like the first. My son, seeing me alone, said all the right things. You shouldn't be by yourself, he told me. Come live with us, Mom. We'll take care of everything. And the way he said it felt like comfort, like safety. I wanted to believe I could find a new version of home in his house, so I said yes. At first, I brought pieces of my life with me, my favorite chair, the lamp that always made my reading corner feel warm, my box of watercolor brushes. I thought I was adding a bit of myself to his world, blending to generations under one roof. But little by little, I noticed things changing not just outside, but inside me too. The chair didn't match their decor. The lamp was too dim for the room. The box of brushes sat untouched, quietly moved into the garage. I told myself it was okay, that I didn't need those things anymore. But that's how it starts. Not with a fight, but with small, silent sacrifices. You give up a piece of comfort here, a sliver of identity there. Not because anyone demands it, but because you want to fit in. You want to be easy. You don't want to seem like a burden. That's when the rules began to appear. Not written down, not spoken harshly, just present, quiet, and firm. I noticed how my son would pause when I mentioned going to the market alone, how his wife would politely suggest I wait to eat until everyone was ready. The little corrections: you shouldn't walk too far, maybe don't use those spices, the kids won't like it, don't stay up too late, rest is important at your age. At first, these comments seemed harmless, even caring, but over time, they formed a pattern, a structure, a subtle message that said, you belong here, but only in the version we approve of. And that version, she wasn't curious, or loud, or whimsical. She didn't dance barefoot in the kitchen. She followed instructions. She stayed in her lane. It's a slow transformation, this erasing. You don't even realize you're disappearing because it comes disguised as protection. You start asking before you do things you once did freely. You wait for permission to be yourself. And the worst part, you begin to doubt that you ever had the right to choose. There's a truth hidden in this stage of life that people don't talk about enough. We assume that the biggest changes happen when we're young, when we're building careers, having children, chasing dreams. But there's a whole different kind of shift that happens later. It's quieter, but just as powerful. And it revolves around one central question: who am I allowed to be now? In my case, the answer was gradually rewritten by other people's decisions. Decisions that came from love, yes, but also from fear. Fear that I might fall, that I might forget, that I might not adjust. But what no one seemed to ask was what I wanted. What brought me joy? What made me feel alive? This phase of life should be a time of reflection, yes, but also of freedom, of rediscovery, of finally doing the things we postponed for decades. And yet, for many women like me, it becomes a chapter of quiet compliance, a surrender that no one demanded but that we gave, because we didn't know we could say no. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because what lies beneath these surface changes, the ones we brush off as just part of aging, is a deeper mental shift, a change in how we see ourselves, a transformation, not of the body, but of identity. And it's in that space, in those unspoken adjustments, that the most revealing truths begin to show themselves. We begin to accept less, not because we deserve less, but because we've been trained to believe our voices hold less weight. Our desires become secondary, our routines optional, our silence expected. But behind closed doors, in the quiet of our own minds, we remember the version of ourselves that was never afraid to ask for more. And we wonder where she went. Comment there: that makes sense to me. He says he's protecting me, but he tells me what to wear, what to eat, even how to laugh. At first, I didn't notice the weight of those words. They came wrapped in affection, delivered with a smile that made them seem harmless. You should wear something warmer, he'd say, tugging gently at my sleeves. Don't eat too much salt, Mom, it's not good for your pressure. Or, the one that stung more than I ever admitted, that laugh of yours maybe, don't be so loud around the kids. You know how they get. Each comment, standing alone, felt like care. But when you put them together, they begin to build a wall, a structure, a mold, and that mold doesn't leave room for who I am, it only allows for who he thinks I should be now. What's hard to explain is that I never asked to be taken care of like this. I didn't forget how to live. I didn't ask for a script. But somehow, I found myself playing along, nodding, adjusting, shrinking, just a little, over and over. It's like being edited, sentence by sentence, until your story reads like someone else's version of your life. And the most delicate part of all this, it doesn't feel like cruelty. That's what makes it so difficult to name. It's affection mixed with control, a truth hidden behind a curtain of good intentions. But good intentions, when unchecked, can become cages, and love, when it stops listening, can start silencing. There's a strange guilt that grows in that silence, because you know they care. You know they think they're helping. So when you begin to feel suffocated, unrecognizable to yourself, you also feel ungrateful for even thinking it. You tell yourself, he just wants what's best for me. But deep down, a different question whispers louder. What if he's forgotten that I still know what's best for me, too? The emotional impact of this kind of dynamic is hard to describe. It's not a sharp pain, it's slow erosion. You start questioning your own instincts, you become hesitant. You second guess what once felt natural, what you wear, what you cook, how you greet people. You even begin to rehearse your responses, anticipating how your choices will be received. That's when you realize something is off, not just in the relationship, but in how you're seeing yourself. It becomes more than a family issue. It turns into a mindset, a belief system you begin to internalize without consent. And that's where the real transformation happens, not on the outside, but inside your sense of self. You shift from being the author of your own life to merely acting out a part written by someone else, hoping not to disappoint the people who claim to love you most. I started noticing how I spoke less in conversations. I held my stories back. I stopped playing my favorite songs in the morning because they bothered the routine. Even the way I moved changed. I found myself walking quieter, more carefully, as if my presence needed to be small in order to be accepted. All of this under the illusion of being considerate. But considerate to whom? And at what cost? What many people don't realize is that this isn't about conflict. It's about absence, the absence of agency, the disappearance of the right to choose your own pace, your own tone, your own joys. And that absence creates an invisible loneliness, even in a house full of people. Now, I want to go even deeper into this subject, because behind these subtle controls, there are much larger questions waiting to be uncovered, questions about identity, respect, and the fine line between protection and possession. There are truths hidden in the way we justify our silence, and revelations waiting in the moments we dare to speak up again. Right there, I'm on this journey too. I sit in my room, hearing laughter in the living room, but I'm not invited. They say I get tired too fast. At first, I believed them. Maybe I did get tired easily. Maybe my stories were too long, or my reactions too slow. Maybe I wasn't fun anymore, not in the way they remembered. So I started excusing myself before anyone could do it for me. I'd say, go on ahead, I'll just rest for a bit. But inside, something deeper was happening. Something I didn't want to admit, even to myself. The truth is, I wasn't resting. I was retreating. Because every time I walked into a room full of people I love, I felt like a guest, a quiet observer, like I was part of the furniture, politely acknowledged, but no longer needed in the story unfolding around me. And that kind of invisibility, it leaves a mark you can't see, but you feel in your bones. You see, solitude is different from isolation. I've known solitude. I've sat peacefully with a book, a cup of tea, a window full of sunlight, and felt whole. But this is something else entirely. This is silence born from exclusion. This is hearing your name mentioned in the third person, like you're not even there. This is being told, we didn't want to bother you, when all you wanted was to feel included, even if just for a moment. There's a certain pain in being forgotten in the middle of a full house. It's not loud. It doesn't scream. It just settles quietly into the corners of your chest and stays there, day after day. And when you try to bring it up, when you say something like, I would have liked to be there, they respond with surprise, or worse, dismissal. Oh, we thought you were sleeping. We didn't think you'd enjoy it. We just wanted to give you peace. But peace is not the same as distance. Comfort is not the same as silence. And love, real love, means being seen, not just sheltered. It's strange how the heart adjusts, how it learns to shrink itself to match the space it's given. I began speaking less, even when spoken to. I answered in short sentences, waiting to be dismissed from conversations like a student excused from class. I laughed only when others did, measuring my timing, making sure I wasn't too much. And all of this in a place that was supposed to be home. That's the truth people don't see from the outside. The real transformation doesn't happen in one big moment. It unfolds slowly, in the spaces where you're no longer invited, in the decisions made without you, in the plans you hear about after they've happened. And yet, I kept telling myself that it wasn't intentional. They weren't trying to hurt me. They just didn't think, and isn't that part of the problem? When people stop thinking of you as someone with presence, with opinions, with energy to still be part of things, that's when the fading begins. There's a deep mental shift that happens here. You begin to believe that your needs are a disruption, that your voice is an interruption. And before long, you're not just excluded, you begin to exclude yourself. That's the most dangerous part, because once you start removing yourself from the picture, it becomes easier for everyone else to forget to draw you back in. It took me a long time to realize that the silence wasn't coming from outside, it was growing inside me. I had internalized the message, "You've had your time. Now, step aside." And I did. But I did it with a heavy heart, and a part of me quietly hoping someone would notice and say, "No, stay. We still need you here." Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because underneath the stillness of that silence, there are hidden layers, truths about emotional presence, the invisible weight of being left out, and the ripple effect it has on how we see our worth in the world. Comment there. That makes sense to me. One day, I wore my red scarf, the one I'd had for years, the one that reminded me of a version of myself I hadn't seen in a while. I used to wear it with confidence, not to impress anyone, but because it made me feel alive, vibrant, like I still belonged in the world of color and movement and self-expression. I wrapped it around my neck that morning, as a quiet rebellion, a small statement that said, "I'm still here." And then he saw me, my son. He paused, looked me up and down, and said, "You're not young anymore, Mom. Stop acting like you are." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't even sound angry. It was said in that calm, matter-of-fact tone people use when they believe they're being practical. But for me, it was a moment of collapse. Not outside but inside. That was the day I realized he doesn't see me anymore. Not the real me. Not the woman who once walked through Paris in the rain, laughing with her shoes in her hand. Not the one who learned how to make perfect bread by watching her own mother's hands. Not the one who still tears up when certain songs play, or who loves red scarves because they remind her she doesn't have to disappear quietly. He saw a number, an age, a responsibility. It hit me harder than I expected, that sentence, because behind it was a truth I hadn't wanted to face. He wasn't just trying to guide or protect me. He had stopped recognizing me as a full person. Somewhere along the way, I had been reduced to a role, the aging mother who needed to be managed, not heard, not considered, not even really acknowledged for who I was outside of that role. And the thing is, I don't think he meant to do that. I don't think he even realized it. That's what makes this kind of disconnection so insidious. It doesn't happen with cruelty. It happens with routine, with assumptions, with the slow rewriting of dynamics, where one person stops believing the other is capable of change, of passion, of desire. He thought he was helping. But help, when it lacks recognition of the other's humanity, becomes something else entirely. It becomes erasure. It's moments like that which show us just how delicate identity is, how easily it can be overwritten by someone else's perception. We all want to feel seen, not just looked at. And when the people closest to us begin to treat us like we've stopped evolving, that's when we begin to question ourselves. We start to wonder, maybe I am being ridiculous. Maybe red scarves are for someone else, someone younger, someone louder, someone more relevant. But here's what I've come to understand. That thought, that inner questioning, is the most dangerous form of surrender. Because the moment we start asking for permission to be ourselves, we've already stepped outside of our own skin. We've already begun to retreat from the core of who we are. And that retreat leaves space for others to define us, to limit us, to tell our stories without asking how we want them told. I stood in the mirror that day, still wearing the scarf. I looked at myself, really looked, and I didn't see a woman who was trying to be young. I saw a woman who remembered herself, who missed her own voice, who, despite everything, still had the fire to express, to choose, to live with color. And the irony is, none of that has anything to do with youth. It has to do with spirit. But spirit doesn't age the way BAFTAs do. It stretches, it deepens, and it waits quietly until you're brave enough to reclaim it. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because underneath that one sentence, "You're not young anymore. Stop acting like you are," there's a whole web of hidden messages, quiet judgments, and unspoken rules about how we're expected to behave as we grow older. And the impact of those messages, they run deeper than most people ever realize. Comment there, that makes sense to me. I may have wrinkles, but I still feel music, I still dream, I'm still me. And that, I think, is the part no one prepares you for, the persistence of self. Even when the world around you tries to file you into a quieter version of yourself, you age, yes, your body slows, your skin softens, your pace changes, but inside, there are still sparks. The melodies you loved when you were 20 still stir something in your chest. The scent of fresh bread still makes you smile without thinking. You still look at a sunset and think, there's so much beauty left in this world. But when you're treated as if those feelings are no longer valid, when your excitement is met with polite smiles or subtle condescension, it creates an invisible barrier, like you're expected to gracefully fade into a corner, to enjoy things in your head and not express too much, not be too much. And what that really means is, don't be yourself. Be a version of you that fits the mold of who they believe you've become. It's a strange betrayal, not because it comes from cruelty, but because it often comes wrapped in affection. That's what makes it so easy to doubt yourself. You start to think, maybe I am being silly. Maybe I should sit down. Maybe no one wants to hear this memory for the third time. But deep down, something in you resists. Quietly, but fiercely. Because being alive doesn't stop at a number. Joy doesn't retire. And the desire to be heard, to be seen, to be known, it doesn't diminish with age. If anything, it grows stronger, because you realize how much time you've already spent being everything for everyone else. That red scarf wasn't about youth. It was about identity. It was a whisper of rebellion, a way of saying, I am still here, and I matter. And I think every woman, at some point, feels the need to say that, not out of bitterness, but out of truth, because there comes a moment when silence is no longer comfortable, when pleasing everyone feels more exhausting than simply being honest. What most people don't see are the behind-the-scenes decisions we make every day, the tiny negotiations we have with ourselves. Do I speak up, or do I keep the peace? Do I mention what I miss, or do I smile and say I'm fine? Do I wear the thing I love, or will it make me look like I'm trying too hard? These aren't superficial thoughts. They're symptoms of something deeper, a slow erosion of agency that creeps in when your presence is tolerated, but not celebrated. And so many of us carry this silent grief, not just for lost time, but for the version of ourselves we once promised never to let go, the one who used to laugh without apology, who danced barefoot without worrying about what others would think, who wore color just because it felt good. That version of us is still alive, still waiting, still weighty of space. The journey back to her isn't always loud. It doesn't come with grand declarations. Sometimes, it starts with something as small as choosing a scarf you haven't worn in years, or playing a song that brings tears to your eyes because it reminds you of who you were, who you are. And each of those small choices is an act of return, a way of saying, I am not done yet. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because beneath this silent reclaiming, there's something powerful unfolding, a shift in mentality, a quiet revolution. And once you feel it, truly feel it, too begin to see all the ways you were conditioned to let go of your own voice, and how much more powerful it becomes when you choose, intentionally, to take it back. Right there, I'm on this journey too. This is my story. Maybe it's your mother's too. Don't silence her. Don't erase her. Let her be. Because what we so often forget, what society teaches us to overlook, is that even in the quietest woman, there is still a storm of memories, of passions, of unfinished dreams. There is still a full, complex, evolving human being. But when that woman becomes a mother, and then a grandmother, and then the elder, people stop asking who she is. They stop imagining she has anything left to say that hasn't already been said. And with each assumption, each decision made for her instead of with her, she fades a little more from the center of her own life. But I refuse to vanish. Yes, I carry time on my skin, and yes, I've slowed down in some ways. But my inner world, it's alive, rich, full of color. I still get butterflies when I hear a certain song. I still miss people who are gone, and still love fiercely those who remain. I still want to try new things, even if the world keeps telling me to settle down, to let go, to stay quiet. And that's the real tragedy, isn't it? The belief that aging is a process of subtraction, when in truth, it should be a process of deepening, of layering, of becoming more of yourself, not less, but instead, we're offered a false comfort, the illusion of safety, structure, and what's best for us. Behind that curtain of concern, the truth gets buried. And that truth is, it's easier to manage someone when you've already decided who they are. It's easier to guide a person when you stop seeing her as someone with her own compass. And the longer we live within that framework, the more we start to accept it. We adapt to invisibility as if it's inevitable. As if the only version of respect we can expect is silence and distance. But deep respect doesn't erase a person. It listens to her. It invites her back into the conversation. It recognizes that her story didn't end when she became a parent or when she started needing help. Real respect doesn't reduce a person to what she can no longer do. It honors who she still is. And the impact of that shift of truly seeing someone again, it's enormous. It can bring light back into their voice. It can reignite creativity, joy, and even health. Because when someone feels valued, they live differently. They carry themselves with a little more strength. Their presence becomes louder, fuller, because they know they matter. Again, they know they haven't been filed away. You may not see it from the outside, but there is a silent revolution happening in so many hearts like mine, a quiet defiance. We are remembering ourselves, not to go back to who we were, but to stand fully in who we still are, because we are not relics. We are not fragile figures waiting for instructions. We are women, full of history, yes, but also full of present, and absolutely worthy of a future that still feels like our own. If this story reminds you of someone, maybe even yourself, pause and ask, when was the last time I really looked at her, really listened, really asked her what she wanted, without assuming I already knew the answer? Because letting someone be is not passive. It's an act of courage, of trust, of love, in its truest, most unselfish form. And when you offer that kind of space to someone, you're not just respecting who they were, you're choosing to meet who they are, right now, in this chapter. Not with pity, not with fear, but with presence. That's what I want. Not control, not restriction, not pity disguised as protection, just presence. Just room to breathe, to choose, to keep becoming, even now, especially now. If this story touched your heart, it's probably because, in some quiet corner of your life, you've seen this happening. Maybe in your own mother's eyes, maybe in your grandmother's silence, maybe even in the way you've started to question your own voice, your space, your role. The truth is, these moments don't always arrive with dramatic weight. They creep in, gently, through familiar routines, through well-meaning gestures, through words that sound like love but feel like erasure. And that's where the real conversation needs to begin, not in blame, not in guilt, but in awareness. Because the line between protecting and controlling can be so thin, it almost disappears. We tell ourselves we're helping. We say, I just want what's best. But best for whom? And who gets to decide that? What seems harmless to one person might feel suffocating to another. And when that other is someone who spent her life putting everyone else first, maybe, just maybe, it's time to ask her what she wants now. We live in a world that celebrates independence in youth, but often strips it away from the elderly, especially women. There's this hidden script, this quiet expectation that, at a certain point, she's done living for herself. That everything from that moment on should be safe, predictable. But what we don't talk about enough is the cost of that narrative. The internal transformation that takes place when someone stops being asked about her dreams, her preferences, her joy. Imagine what it does to a woman to hear, over and over again, it's better this way, when this way is so far from who she is. Imagine how it feels to be offered comfort, but at the price of your identity. That's not support. That's redesign. That's rebuilding someone in an image that's easier for others to manage, and the impact. It's quiet, but devastating. A woman who once moved with color and conviction starts to second-guess herself. She starts to shrink not in body, but in presence. And the world doesn't notice, because she's still physically there, still smiling, still saying it's okay. But deep inside, something is unraveling. This is why these stories matter. Because they reveal the truth behind the smiles, the truth behind the silence. The moments no one sees, the ones in the hallway. After the laughter fades, the ones where she stands in front of the mirror, holding a scarf she used to love, wondering if it's appropriate now. The internal debate over whether she's allowed to be herself anymore. These are not dramatic crises. These are daily reckonings, quiet negotiations with invisibility. So if you're listening to this and thinking about someone you love, maybe it's time to revisit the way you see her. Maybe she doesn't need more rules. Maybe she needs more room. Room to remember who she is, to express what she still feels, to exist beyond the role she's been boxed into for so long. And if you are that woman, if you're sitting in that room, wondering if anyone still sees you, let me just say this. You are not asking for too much. You are not being dramatic. Wanting to be heard, to be included, to feel alive again. That's not selfish. That's human. That's your right. You gave so much to everyone else. Maybe now it's time to give something back to yourself, because here's the thing most people never stop to ask. Do you know what your mother gave up to become just mom? Not because she was forced, not because she regrets it, but because, in the process of loving everyone else, she quietly placed parts of herself on the shelf, waiting for the day someone might notice and ask her to pick them back up. That day can be now.